Welcome to Chapter 4, The Long Sleep of Empty Years, from Miss MacIntosh, My Darling, by Marguerite Young. You have just spent Chapter 3 falling a little in love with Miss MacIntosh. Young made sure of that. She gave you the red hair and the black umbrella and the fireflies in a jar, the corset and the sensible shoes and the cold morning swims. She gave you a woman who was the truest thing in the house. And then she reminded you, as she did in Chapter 1 and now again here, that Miss MacIntosh is gone. Chapter 4 is about what that loss does to Vera. And it is, in its quiet way, one of the most honest portraits of grief in the novel. Miss MacIntosh has disappeared. Her clothes were on the beach. The 2 pennies were in her purse. Vera sits by the shore for what feels like years, crying, barely functioning, her body described as slothful and immense, her mind employed by nothing but the dream. She tries to write a book. She lights fires on the beach. She talks to fishermen and sailors, asking questions no one can answer. Her mother, Catherine, watches this and makes her own diagnosis. Vera is losing her sanity. Catherine's solution is the one she has always had: the opium, the withdrawal, the beautiful obliteration. She offers Vera a vision of eternal youth and dreamless sleep, jewels and supernatural servants, an opium paradise where nothing can hurt her anymore. She is, in her way, trying to be a good mother. Grief is the engine of this chapter, but Young is not interested in simple grief. She is interested in what grief does to a person over time, how it can become its own kind of opium, its own withdrawal from the world. Vera has been lost before. She grew up lost, in a house where reality was optional. Miss MacIntosh was the thing that tethered her. And now the tether is gone, and Vera is discovering something terrifying, that without it, she is capable of floating away just as her mother did. That the boundary between herself and Catherine is thinner than she thought. This is why Catherine's offer of opium is so dangerous in this chapter. Not because it is obviously wrong, but because it is almost tempting. Vera can see the appeal. She can see how a person ends up in that bed. Young drops this story into the chapter without explanation or fanfare, and it is easy to read past it. Don't. The reality of women's lives in the era Young is writing about is part of what this image carries. Marriage was not simply an option. It was, for most women, the entire structure of a viable life. There was no other architecture. The woman on the bridge was on her way to that architecture. And she chose the water instead. Young does not judge her. She just shows you the bridge. Catherine genuinely loves Vera. The opium paradise she offers her daughter is not cruelty. It is the best gift she has. She has found a way to stop hurting, and she wants to give it to the person she loves most. The jewels, the supernatural servants, the eternal youth. These are not a trap she is setting. She arrives as a voice of experience, warning Vera about where she is headed. What cheer or wherever Vera is going is not what she imagines. It is cold and silent, and the community has collapsed in on itself. The golden bowl is broken. She is not wrong, exactly. But notice what she represents: the voice that says, "Don't go." The voice of reasonable caution, of hard-won disillusionment, of the person who has already made the journey and come back diminished. Vera listens to her, and then goes anyway. This is who Vera is. This is arguably who she has to be. Vera gets on the train. After all of it, the years of grief, the mother's beautiful offer of oblivion, the warning from the fat, soft-faced lady, she gets on the train and goes toward What Cheer, Iowa. This section introduces the wheel and the spokes, summarizing the 11 pillars of Marguerite Young's philosophy in Miss MacIntosh, My Darling. The first pillar is the plural self, illustrated by the bus driver. He is simultaneously a driver, a dreamer, a baby, a mythical figure, a whaler, a prophet, and potentially dead. He embodies multiple realities at once. Illusion as primary, the chapter is structured around a sustained, irresolvable question: what is real? The bus driver insists the doctor's patients are illusions. There are none of these pregnant women you think there are, while the narrative simultaneously presents the pregnant woman on the bus as physically present. The doctor thinks he is practicing medicine. The bus driver thinks he is driving. The narrator is a passenger on a journey whose destination may be death. None of these perspectives is privileged. Grief as permanent weather. The chapter is saturated in a grief that has no object and no resolution. It is simply the climate of the world being described. The gray miles, the washed-out bridges, the flooded roads, the dead orchards, the cherry trees, bending and breaking under their weight of snow. These are not symbols of grief so much as grief itself made landscape. The witness The narrator's role in this chapter is almost entirely that of witness. She asks only two questions: how much longer? And why don't you cut your hair? And otherwise simply receives the bus driver's monologue, his philosophy, his grief, his politics, his cosmology. She does not judge, does not resolve, does not explain. She stays in the room. Recursive construction. The bus route itself is the formal embodiment of recursive construction. The bus, detour 1,000 miles to advance 1, passes the same things again and again, the same rail fences broken down and horse fountains, circles back through the same rail fences broken down again. Progress is not linear. The road returns to its beginning. The ethics of incompletion. The chapter has no resolution. The bus does not arrive. The birth does not occur. The argument with the doctor is never concluded. The political situation is not resolved. The mother does not wake. The hair is not cut. The chapter simply continues, sentence after sentence, clause after clause, in Jung's characteristic style of the ongoing, never concluded sentence. The ontology of the marginal. Quote, God liked a little variety, something to keep God awake, and God must have been asleep when he created man out of the dust. God forgot to create some of us, and some of us created ourselves. The marginal person is not the exception to creation. They are the evidence that creation is incomplete, ongoing, and partly self-made. Sedimentary time. The most explicit statement. Sometimes, their graves opening in the spring floods and rains, they were washed up years afterward, and then it could be seen that they who had been buried alive had torn out their hair. The dead return through the literal action of the earth. The floods wash up what was buried. The sediment gives back its contents. The pillar of language as construction, Jung's prose style, is itself an enactment of this pillar. The sentences are enormously long, self-qualifying, self-interrupting, recursive. They name their own uncertainty as they proceed. The language does not pretend to speak from nowhere. It speaks from inside the bus driver's drunk, hair-obscured, politically compromised, possibly dead consciousness, and it knows this about itself. Immanent transcendence. The sacred in this chapter does not point outward to a beyond. It points deeper into the gray bus, the drunken driver, the flooded roads, the dead mother's dream. The transcendent is not elsewhere. It is here, in the most ordinary and degraded circumstances, intensified. The crossing point. This is the pillar that gives the chapter its deepest structural logic. The bus driver is explicitly identified as a crossing point between birth and death, between his mother's past and the unborn passenger's future, between the living and the dead. He was not responsible. He had not created the world, nor the distance between one place and another, yet he carries everyone across it. The obligation is not chosen. He did not choose to be the bus driver. He is the bus driver, because the doctor brought him into the world, because his mother dreamed him, because the route exists and someone must drive it. The bus driver is carrying the not yet born.